control is used to display an image in our application. And while I can drag the picture box to the form, probably the better way to do is to take the picture box control and drag the approximate size that you want for your image. Now, I can change that size in the properties, and I happen to know that the file I'm going to bring in to display is 640 by 450. So I'm going to set that to 640, 450, press the enter key. I can put this in a location that I want, or if I know the exact location, of course, I could change that in the location property. I'm also going to set the background color to black, and that will display the background color when no image is being displayed. But really the most important property for the picture box is the image property. So I'm going to go to the image property. I'm going to click the button for the dialog box with the 3 ellipses. And here are our options for selecting a resource. I can bring in a local resource and import it, or I can go to the project resource file. Now the project resource file are images that have been embedded in my project and that will get compiled with the project. I prefer to use this route rather than the local resource because the location of that local resource may change from computer to computer or even within my project in the Visual Studio editor. So I'm going to import this. I'm going to click the import button and go find the image that I want to import. Now I've created a folder called PictureBox Demo Images, and you can get that in the Canvas website. And the image I want to bring in is this basketball.jpg. And you'll see there are several images dealing with sports: baseball, basketball, football, golf, tennis, soccer, and volleyball. So to show you how I got that size, in Windows Explorer, you can right-click on an image and go to the properties. And if you click Details, you will see the dimensions of that image. So this one is 640 by 450. And I've gone into Photoshop and sized all of these sports images to be the same. They're all 640 by 450. So I can swap them in this picture box and they'll all be sized perfectly. So this brings up a very important point as a developer. I strongly recommend that you learn to use Adobe Photoshop or some other graphics package. Photoshop certainly is the industry standard. I will warn you, Photoshop is not necessarily the easiest program to learn. There's a lot of bells and whistles to it to really master it. And we do offer classes in Photoshop here at South Mountain, both a beginning and an advanced, and they're each 3 credits. But you'll find lots of resources online as well where you can learn to use Photoshop, including Adobe TV. So I'm going to import this. Now before I do that, let's look at the Solution Explorer here, because you're going to see something change over here when I import this. It's going to create a resources folder. So I'm going to choose Import. And then in my Select Resource, I'm going to click OK. So you can see that it brought in the basketball as a listing of my project resources. I'm going to click OK. And now over here in the Solution Explorer, we've added a folder called Resources, and the basketball.jpg is part of that resource. And we see the image display here. I can go back to the image property and import more. So I'm going to bring in the baseball, and I can hold down the Control key and maybe grab these other 2, football and golf, and say Open. It'll bring them all in at the same time. And when I click OK, again, we're going to see these all added into our resources folder. All right, I'm going to go back and reselect the basketball image. I think it's really important that the image being displayed is not distorted. And I'll show you what I mean by that. There's a SizeMode property down here for the picture box, and I'm just going to make my picture box a little bit larger. So I've resized it, stretched it out, and let's look at these different size modes. So normal means it will appear as its 100% view starting in the upper left. And so if I were to make this smaller, we would see that it crops out the bottom and the right. if I change this to stretch image, it's going to stretch the image to the dimensions of the picture box. And one of the problems with this is it's distorting the basketball. The basketball is no longer round. I would avoid stretching images for the most part. Let's look at another one. There's an auto size. And the auto size says I'm going to resize the picture box to match the image itself. I'm going to go back to normal so I can resize my picture box again. And we'll again just kind of stretch this out to the right, to the bottom. And there's another size mode here of center image. So when I choose that, it's going to center the image in the picture box. And then finally there's a zoom. It will zoom the image to the dimensions of the picture box, either horizontally or vertically, whichever fits, or both. So in this case, I still have some black bars on the left and right. But notice if I make it small, it is zooming the image to make it smaller, or I can make it larger. I would caution you about making the picture box larger than the image and zooming, because the image can get pixelated, meaning that especially curved edges can be very rastered. So again, I like to use the normal or the auto size. I'm going to go back to normal. And I'm going to use normal for a purpose that I'll explain in a minute. And as I'm going to make my image a little bit larger, and again, let's go back to center here. So I get this border. Maybe I'm going to change the color of that border and make it white. So I get a nice little border around my image. There's another way to do this. I'm going to go back to auto size. And there's a padding property. So the padding property is 4 numbers, 4 integers. The first number is the amount of padding on the left, then the top, right, and bottom. So I'll put a little border around all this. I'm going to go 10, 10, and let's say 40. And now I have a border of 10 pixels left, top, right, and a 40 pixel on the bottom. And I might do that, perhaps I want a caption so I can create a label on top of this. I'm going to put some text in my label, and I'll just type in basketball. And I'm going to change the font. And I'll change the background color. I'm going to name my picture box. So I'm going to name it Pick Sport. The Hungarian notation for picture box usually is Pick. Some people use PBX, some people just use PB. But Pick is pretty much the standard. And I'm going to create a button. Caption my button will be baseball. We're going to name this one VTN baseball. And I'm going to select and paste. This one will be VTN basketball. And I'll paste one more. This will be football. So I want to show you programmatically how you can change the image. While we're here, let's set this label to LBL caption for the title. And we'll change the picture and the label. We're going to talk about how changing properties in an application can be done programmatically. And our code is going to be the object name dot the property equals and some new value. So I'm going to click on the baseball button. I'm going to double click on it, and that will launch the editor. Here's my stub for btn baseball underscore click. And we had our picture box of pick sport. I'm going to change the image. And to change an image that is in the resources in C#, we can have it equal properties dot resources dot, and I can then choose the resource or type it in. So I want this one to be baseball. Need my semicolon. Let's change that caption. We're going to change the text property of the caption equal to baseball. I'm going to go back to my design form. I'm going to double click on basketball, and what I'm going to do here is just simply copy, paste. I'm going to change the baseball to basketball and change my caption. And we'll do the last one of football. Again, just going to paste. So by the way, what I'm doing here is I'm selecting the caption and the period. If I just type a period again, I'll get the IntelliSense, and I can choose football. Okay, now I'm going to test this. Baseball, basketball, football. So my three buttons change the image that's being displayed and also change the caption. I'm going to take those three and delete them. We're going to also delete the caption here, and we're going to modify our program. I'm going to show you one more thing you can do with PictureBoxes. So I'm going to take the picture box and I'm going to basically stretch it out so that it encompasses my application. I'm going to change the size mode to be normal. Stretch it out. I'm going to go back to the padding and change that all back to zeros. And I'm going to set the image to be none at this point. So here's my blank picture box. We looked at setting the back color, but it's also a background image. And there's a background image layout. And these two go hand in hand. So I'm going to go back and select another image. I'm going to import. And this time I'm going to import the SMCC logo tile. And you can see this image has the South Mountain logo, and then that logo is divided into the four different corners. So at the top, this would be the top, in the bottom right would be the top left of the logo. The bottom left is the top right, and the top left is the bottom right, and the top right is the bottom left. And I created this again in Photoshop. Took the logo and created the tile, this repeating tile. So now when I say OK, because I have the background layout set to tile, it repeats. And I get this nice backdrop with the logo repeated throughout. Now I can change that background layout. Again, I can do none. I can center it. I can stretch it. And I can zoom. And we go back to tile. Now the cool thing about the picture box is I can have this background image, but I can also still have an image. So I'm going to go to the image property again, and I'm going to import a couple more images. So I brought in the Husky, the Roddy with background, and the title. So I'm going to click OK. And now I want this image maybe to be centered. So while my background image is tiled, the image itself, I can change the size mode and set it to be centered. Now the images you're bringing in generally are JPEGs, JPGs, or JPEGs extensions, or PNG files, PNG files. And just if you don't know the difference between the two, the PNG file can have an alpha background, meaning it can be transparent. And just to show you the difference of that, I'm going to go back to image and select the Roddy with background. So this could be a JPG file. It's actually a PNG file, but it's got a background on it. I have the same image with the background set to transparent, which again I did in Photoshop. And now you can see that that transparent background allows the background image of our picture box to be displayed around the image. So the PNGs give you a little more flexibility in terms of blending things together if you have transparent backgrounds. PNG files, however, because they have that additional alpha channel, can be a little bit larger. And again, I can create some buttons to change the image. I'm going to go to the button tool. And we'll create a button here. This one's going to be title. We'll call it BTN title. And we'll create one for the Husky. One for the Rottweiler. I'm going to code these buttons. So I'm going to go to the title button. And also getting a little red squiggly here for LBL caption because that no longer exists. So I'm going to just simply copy the first line and we're going to change the resource file to title. Now I'm going to get rid of these others since they no longer exist. They have 0 references. Not being used. I'm just going to delete. I'm going to come back here, do the Husky. And again, I just like to copy and paste. Bring up the IntelliSense of the Husky, add my semicolon, and bring up the Roddy. Okay, so let's test this. I can click title, I can click Husky, I can click Roddy. And so the background image stays the same, but we're simply changing the image. So that's how you can work with PictureBoxes inside a Windows Form application.